104.7 The Cave. KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
Happy Sunday, August 1st to you. It is Ned Talk, our local live sports talk show. The heat is broken and the rain fell last night. Ned Reynolds only got to see 4 innings of a baseball game. How are you, Ned?
Thank you, Joe. That's exactly right. We had a telecast last night that lasted all of 4 and then probably an hour and a half of delay, and it ended up a total delay, suspended.
Yeah. And John Oliver's with us. John, how are you?
I'm doing well. So it's a nice cool day today.
Yeah, the heat's finally broke. It's not oppressive. Yesterday, man.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. This is not a weather show. It's a sports show. Ned always points that out to me.
It is not a weather show.
Not a weather show. It's a sports show. So let's talk sports. There's so much to talk about. Where do you want to start out? I guess the place, obviously, to start would be the Olympics. Want to start there?
And our situation is pretty good. Maybe not the greatest at the Olympics, but pretty good. I noticed that Miss Biles is sitting out as really I expected it to be the case. Mm-hmm. The individual events, her specialty is the vault, and she's out of that now, has decided not to compete. And it's a shame, because here's a young lady who's devoted her life. She's only 24 years old, but devoted her life and is really the poster child for all of gymnastics and maybe for the Olympic team itself. So she's not able to compete, but some of the others, including the young lady Lee from St. Paul, Minnesota, Simosi, I'm not sure what her first name is, but regardless of that, she has done very well and won golds, and that's wonderful. She's a future Auburn Lady Tiger in their gymnastics team as well. That team, our swimming team's been nothing short of outstanding. Really anxious to see what our men's basketball team does now. They've made the quarterfinals. That's hardly unexpected. Did dismantle. And have you seen any of the games at all, John?
I did watch some of the last game, the men's game, yeah.
The teams that they're playing, Iran and the Czech Republic, really, for first fives, match up, and they can play with our guys for a while. It's the depth factor.
Oh, yeah.
They do not have the benches, and you saw what happened. Well, the quarterfinal opponent is going to be Spain. Now, the USA has already played Spain once in an exhibition game. You know, Spanish team, the Gasol brothers and Ricky Rubio, and there are others. It's a veteran team. They're almost all NBA players.
Yes.
Maybe not literally the case, but they're almost all. They're very good. They're a former world champion like from 2 years ago. USA beat them in Las Vegas. But can they beat them a second time in Tokyo? I don't know. It's really kind of a curious situation, whether or not the USA is getting better. They're probably getting their rhythm in shooting now, but is that going to be enough to carry them to a gold medal? It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's difficult to say with the men's team. And I mean, Popovich came out and said kind of the same thing we've talked about on the show the last couple of weeks. He said, you've got guys that score 25 a night for their team, and there's, everybody can't score 25.
There's only one basketball.
That's right. There's only one basketball. So, hopefully they put team first, and, we can see what they do. I'm really impressed with our swimming. I mean, from the days of Michael Phelps, we dominated so much. And then Katie Ledecky, has been outstanding. I can't remember the gentleman who's won all the golds.
Caleb Dursell.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, just incredible dominance at that. So, yeah, it's been a fun Olympics to watch so far.
I watched a little bit of the soccer yesterday, the women's soccer, and that was a tight match, I should say. That's the appropriate term.
Right.
Against the Netherlands, and it was tied. They had to go to shootouts, and they won it on shootouts. And I watched a little bit of the women's basketball when they took on Japan, and the size-wise, Japan was not anywhere near as big as the U.S. team, but through the first half held their own. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty tight game. Actually, they had the lead a lot through the first half of that game.
Well, that's the same thing with the men. Again, the depth factor and your physical well-being on the court does make a difference, especially in the women's basketball. In the men's game, it's the bench. They can bring in pros from the bench, and the other nations just simply can't match that at all. Now, the Spanish team, who they play coming up, and I think it's very early Tuesday morning, I believe, is when they're going to play. they can match up because their bench is also pretty good. It'll be a very interesting matchup for the USA as to whether or not they can get to the medal round. They're not even in the medal round yet, and this could knock them out of it completely. But we'll see how it works out.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. It's our local live sports talk show. Let's go back to Simone Biles pulling out of the first the team competition and then the individual competition. I've got so many different thoughts on this because mental health is so important, and it's something that comes up in sports a lot more than I think people realize, that the people train their whole lives to do this one thing, and how that affects them as they step on that stage. The pressure can become overwhelming. And in this case, we don't know all the details of what's going on with her. We've heard that she's said that her body and her mind just aren't in sync with each other. Ned, I wanted to get your thoughts on the story and how it's developed.
It has happened before. She is not the first one to fall into that chasms, so to speak, that does befall athletes. Hey, we saw it with the young lady Osaka, the tennis player. She pulled out of Wimbledon simply because of that, and would not go to the media, even though it is mandatory, would not go to any of the media events that are required at the French Open. They kicked her out of that thing. And as a result, she did go to Japan, and I believe she's native to Japan, but she got knocked out of the competition.
She did.
I'm going to carry it over to another sport. We have it in tennis at the moment. The number one tennis player in the world is Novak Djokovic. He is in this competition. He's going for the Golden Slam, and that is so very rare. That's all four of your professional open events and the Olympics. It doesn't happen every year. Well, obviously not. He's going for it, and he gets knocked out by really opponents who are not as good as he is. What did he do in his championship match? Now, keep in mind, this is Novak Djokovic now. This is a number one player, name pro, throws his racket into the stands at one point. The stands are empty. And then at the next point, he hits the stanchions that support the net, and they are metal stanchions, and destroys a racket. I mean, just smashed the thing in two. He was so frustrated with himself and with what was expected of him. I understand Simone Biles' situation, really, and I have a lot of sympathy, because here she has been, as we pointed out, the publicity figure for much of the Olympics, and all the commercials with her doing the thing, and then, hey, watch the Olympics and all this sort of thing. Imagine the mental strain. She's 24 years old, for heaven's sake. And to have that foisted upon, it is part of life, and it's part of maturation. I do understand that, but this is a international event. And then to have that kind of pressure put on you, I understand where she came from.
Absolutely. And I think the main thing I want to convey to the listeners is, I've heard a lot of criticism on Simone Biles, and I understand that. I understand the country pride aspect and, why couldn't she just gut it out? The best thing I can compare it to for your average sports fan is the yips in baseball. We've seen Hall of Fame careers come to an end, basically, with Steve Sachs, Chuck Knobloch, Rick Ankiel, for a local story. he obviously...
Steve Blass.
Yes.
Pirates is
yeah. So that's basically doing some research on it. There is a thing called the twisties. And what that means is, as you alluded to, basically your body isn't doing what your mind tells it to because it's out of sync. Biles is afraid she's going to get seriously hurt. And doing some of these events, she could, it's paralyzation. There's all sorts of things that could happen if you're moving at that speed and your body doesn't do what you've trained it to do. So I completely understand it. I do not fault her in the least. I think her future is more important, and especially in the fact that we've done so well without her competing. I think it's a non-story. I think it's something people need to let go.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, John, because watching some of these Olympic events, when they go on the double bars, the parallel bars, and then do all of the mid-air twists and land on their feet, hey, you make a mistake here, and there are very, very serious physical circumstances that can occur, and your physical deficiency is very much at stake.
Yes.
The athleticism of everybody that participates in the Olympics is just amazing. And that's one of the reasons why to watch. I think what most people don't understand is that extra added pressure of supporting or performing for your country and wanting to do well for your country, that you get to a stage and you get to a point, and you see it frequently in sports, especially in the Olympics, especially since they've allowed professional athletes in. I mean, does anybody doubt that Djokovic is the best tennis player in the world? I mean, I watched him play in Wimbledon finals. It was effortless, and he in no time was he ever in trouble. Yet in the Olympics, he's out.
He not only flames out in the gold medal possibility, but in the bronze medal. He didn't even win that.
Right.
Yeah.
And all because, I can't say all, but he's playing individuals who he knows he can beat, but he is also playing them under a different mindset.
Yes.
Because this is, well, the professional Grand Slam is international, yes, but this one's totally different. This is where you have your country at stake and not just yourself.
Right.
And don't think these pros do not realize that. They do.
And I think our expectation levels as fans, and I know I'm guilty of this, are out of whack. You know, we look at NBA players going in and we say, well, they should win everything. They're the best players in the world. And when they don't, we're like, what's wrong? What's happened? What's going on? And it's like they come from all sorts of different teams, all sorts of different schemes, systems. And what you mentioned earlier with what Popovich said, 25 points a night from all these guys, it just doesn't work that way. There has to be a guy, there has to be more than one guy that says, you know what, this is my role. This is what I do for this team. And there has to be some ego setting aside as they go forward for that. And then you just lump the pressure of they played an NBA season and now they're playing in the Olympics. They're not really getting an off season and they're playing for the country. If they didn't win the gold medal, I don't think anybody would blame them.
No, not now. Joe, you have to understand now, it doesn't necessarily have the impact on today's mindset with the audience. It's lessening now, but when this first started, when they brought the pros in, I'm telling you, the general mindset of our fans here, well, these are the NBA. These other people can't even dribble the basketball. I mean, they don't know anything about the game. Well, that's not the case.
No.
They can
not
play. And when you take a look at the NBA teams, as liberally sprinkled with international players as they are now, hey, the game has changed. We still have, we being the USA, still has the most talented athletes, the most skilled athletes, but we don't necessarily have the best team. Is the coach at fault? He has to bear some of the responsibility, of course, because he is the coach. But more than anything else, nobody is at fault, because you have to have a team that practices and plays and works together. And these guys are not in that situation. They can't be. They're getting money from their other pro teams to play. It's an altogether different set. And that's not to say our team won't win, but I will be a little surprised if they do.
Is there any storylines in the Olympics that you want to talk about that has been of particular interest to you?
Oh, well, it's not complete yet, because we won't have some of the track and field until later on, the championships, the gold medal. Yes, I'm particularly looking for the young lady from Nixa, and she is running, I believe, either late Friday night or early Saturday morning for the steeplechase. This is Courtney Frerichs we're talking about, and she carries... Now, here's a situation. She carries the Ozarks banner into Olympic competition, as well as her state, as well as her sport. Now, Courtney's a little bit older than many of the athletes who do go to the Olympics, but she's not old, certainly. No. She's in, early 20s, mid-20s?
Right.
Mid-20s more than anything. And a very highly regarded academic student as well. So maybe she has a bit of a different mindset. But again, think of what her mindset is going into this. Boy, the folks in Missouri are watching me. Everybody's watching me. Hey, this has to have an impact.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that's like. And, well, I'm never going to have that opportunity. What about you, John? Is there something in particular that you've been interested in as far as the Olympics goes?
I have weird interests as far as the Olympics go. I don't think I've talked about that on the air. I love women's gymnastics. I've always enjoyed watching that, so I'll continue to watch that.
I'm going to tell you guys, let me interrupt for a split second.
Mm-hmm.
That is the number one ratings attraction. I mean, it's number one. When you break it down from sport to sport and the Olympic TV coverage, probably the ratings overall aren't as good as they were. But when you break it down, everybody watches the gymnastics.
Yeah, when it's truly amazing to see what these men and women can do. Just it is mind blowing.
The coordination involved is just amazing to me.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy that. I love track and field, so I'm ready for that to kick off. I was a young man who watched all of the superstar competitions where you had Ahmad Rashad and Edwin Moses almost drowning in a pool and, people like that doing things they didn't usually do. So, those events that were on those type of shows, I absolutely enjoy. I love swimming, track and field, gymnastics, the traditional Olympic events.
I can remember when it first started. I'm not a regular viewer of that show, but it first started back, I want to say the mid-'70s, sometime around there. And one of the early contestants on there was the world heavyweight boxing champion Joe Frazier.
Yes.
Smoking Joe. And he was in, I think, the weightlifting, if I'm not mistaken. That was one of the categories. Well, weightlifting is a technique. You have to, he had no idea. Now, here's a guy smoking Joe. He's going to take your head off and a great fighter and all that sort of thing. But he didn't know how to lift the weights. As a result, he didn't get any points. Whoa, Joe Frazier couldn't do that. Hey, you've got to know all of the inner workings of how these events are, in fact, constructed.
Did they used to have weightlifting in the Olympics? Have they taken that out?
No. It's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Is it winter or summer?
It's in the summer games. They haven't publicized it quite as much because it may be, and I'm guessing this, we've had one female athlete from this country who won a medal in, I can't remember it was weightlifting, of course, but one of the categories. That occurred last week. Now, it could be that the big behemoths, what was the name of that big Russian guy?
That's what I was sitting here trying to think, because that ABC Wild World of Sports, they had him on like every month or something, and we always just watched.
I mean,
look what that guy
come
can
on
do.
there, great big character that he was, and I've got another word.
Yeah.
I mean, and never smile, never just kind of lift up the weight, hold it up, slam it down, then walk off. There, Igor or Ivan or somebody.
Yeah, and the steel bar that the weights were on was bending.
Oh, bending.
Right.
Yeah, because he would pick it up and you could see the weights just pull down on the side. It was, that's the one thing. Again, I'll go back to this. Everybody that's in the Olympics, no matter what they're doing, if in the Winter Games, if they're doing curling, if they're doing skateboarding, gymnastics, they're all the top level athletes at what they do. And everything that they do is truly amazing. So it's a great thing to watch the Olympics. It's a great thing to have around. I will admit I don't have the same interests that I used to have in it, but it is the Olympics.
Joe, I think you represent the majority. I found that to be the case, that folks have maybe lost a little bit of their intensity, and there are reasons for that. COVID being one of them. Our focus is on something that's completely different. And here the Olympics was postponed by 1 year, and there are no fans in the stands. The same with baseball, with no fan, or any sport for that matter, that didn't allow the audiences to be a part of it. I think that affected the overall general populace response. And as a result, I think we've seen a lessening of attention. I have watched the Olympic ratings here, and they have not been overwhelming. In fact, they've lost a little bit. There's just a different attitude than what we have now. It may come back. Once we start regenerating a bit of normalcy, and I'm wondering if there is such a thing as normalcy anymore, but if it ever does happen.
This is the new normal.
Oh, God, I hope not.
Oh, yeah, me too. But
I do think one factor people forget about, and I blame this a little bit for the ratings dip, Ned, is the fact when it's in a completely different time zone, which is completely opposite. I think that drowns some of the interest. People want to see things live, so it's different when it's in Canada, the U.S., somewhere in the Western Hemisphere, as opposed to an event going out at 3 a.m. ESPN reports the result, and the next day you're watching it at 3 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be back to talk about one of the other big sports stories going on right now, and that's the baseball trade deadline, winners and losers. We'll have the Reynolds ratings a little bit later on.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
We came up with the name for that weightlifter. What's his last name?
Legiev.
Legiev, yeah.
Here, and I remember the announcers. Well, thus and such just lifted so much weight. But wait a minute, here comes Legiev.
Yeah, amazing. He had 80 world records, 81 Soviet world records, gold medals in 72, 76. No longer with us, age of 69, passed away in 2011. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about baseball trade deadline winners and losers. Let's start with the St. Louis Cardinals. Uh-huh. And they picked up a couple of pitchers.
They did, but you've got to classify them as not a winner or a loser, just a nothing. They're just a total amoeba, so to speak, because they didn't accomplish anything. Yeah, they got the two pitchers, John Lester and J.A. Happ, and they got them for one specific reason. They want somebody to eat some innings.
Yes.
And those guys can do that.
Yes.
No, they're not going to no-hit anybody or be big winners. Lester is way past his prime, and Happ got off to a pretty good start this year, but he was battered.
Faltered badly.
He did really, really badly. And they have those two, and they're there just for that reason, just to occupy places until you get Flaherty and hopefully Flaherty and maybe Michaelis. I'm not sold on Michaelis anyway, but be that as it may, those guys are coming back, and until they do, these guys are going to be thrust into the rotation and asked to do the role. So you can't really say the Cardinals are winners or losers in this case. They just are nothing. They're a non-competitive.
Well, I'll say the trendy opinion I saw. I belong to a lot of Cardinals groups, and I watch a lot of the reviews of the trade deadline that ESPN and other places do. They listed the Cardinals as one of the top two losers. I disagree with that. At this stage, they were 9.5 games out in the season. I know the Cardinals have made miracle runs before. We know about 2011. We know about all of the different times they've overcome the odds. I don't know that that's going to happen this year. And they have such a rich farm system with position players right now. I would have hated to see them mortgage some of that for a what if. You hit it on the absolute head, Ned. These are pitchers that are past their prime. They are there to eat innings, so you can give Oviedo, the Woodfords, chances to learn in the minor leagues and look towards the future. These aren't sexy picks by any means. And what we gave up, John Gant, he's a talented reliever. He walks too many people. Lane Thomas, he's a decent player. We watched him make 3 errors in center field when he was filling in for Bader and Carlson when they were both out. So, these are guys that other teams might be able to use, and they may turn it around someplace else. But I thought it was low risk, low to mid reward for what the Cardinals did. I don't have any problem with it.
Interested to hear you mention the walk factor, too, and Gant was particularly guilty of that. And the Cardinals still do lead the major leagues in walks, but the gap has narrowed. They've cut down greatly on the numbers of walks they were giving up. We were seeing games in which they had 8, 9, 10, sometimes 12 walks in a game. You can't do that and expect to win. It's not going to happen. Now, I noticed the pitchers have reduced that. Now, what the technique is, I don't know. Maybe it's pitch to contact instead of the worrying about how many strikeouts you have, which it's kind of comparable to home runs. I hit 25 home runs. I struck out 500 batter, or whatever the case might be. So what?
Right.
Did you win the game? Well, that may be the case. They may have told them, hey, pitch to contact, let your other 7 defenders out there do what they're supposed to do and see what happens. But you're right. It's just not – it doesn't even figure into the win-loss category. It is a nothing. Now, as far as winners are concerned, I do think, obviously, the Dodgers help themselves.
Yes.
You don't get a guy like Max Scherzer and a shortstop like Trey Turner. You don't get them without having to give up some things, which they did. I was really interested in the Yankees trade. That one really surprised me. Getting Anthony Rizzo from the Cubs. Why did they get Anthony Rizzo? You've got Luke Voigt there at first base. You have other big sluggers on that ball club. Well, I think what they did, and this is just a guess, I have no reason other than what is presented to you for saying this, but here you give up one of the Cubs give him up, one of Chicago's favorites. I mean, this is Anthony Rizzo, a cornerstone of their championship teams, only 32 years old. No, not having a great year. You give him up to the Yankees, but he's still a free agent at the end of the year. I wonder, and they did not. They, being the Yankees, did not do anything with Luke Voigt. There was some speculation they might trade him. Didn't do anything. He's getting over a knee injury. I'm wondering if they don't ask him to play throughout the rest of the year, maybe into the playoffs, maybe into the series, who knows where it goes, then declare a free agent, goes back with the Cubs again. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, it's a possibility.
I, being a longtime Yankee fan, I will tell you the following things. And John and I discussed this before we went on the air. Yankees play in a very left-handed hitting ballpark. That fence in right field is shorter than most high school fences by about 5 to 10 feet.
That is exactly right. It is.
And that lineup, for whatever reason, Brian Cashman, who's the general manager of the New York Yankees, has built, is at most times overwhelmingly right-handed.
Right.
So at a ballpark built for left-handed hitting, why do you have 8 guys that can hit, that are all right-handed for power, and then one guy, usually Brett Gardner, who's past his prime, who's your left-handed hitter? Aaron Hicks is never going to be, he's a switch hitter. He's never going to play full season. I think there's some question in their mind whether Luke Voigt will play full seasons because he's been injured most of this season. And I could tell you the Yankee way is usually to have a platoon situation at first base with the left and right-handed hitter.
Yep.
So I think that ideally they would probably like to keep Rizzo because I think he would be beneficial to them in the long run as far as having that left-handed bat in the order. And he's been on base 8 times in the first 2 games. That's a record for the New York Yankees. So I see them possibly making a run at Rizzo at the end of this season and hanging on to Voigt at the same time.
Could be. That could very well be. You make a very interesting point. I'm going to regurgitate some information that I was reading. This is many, many, many years ago, reading history of the Yankees, and it was a pro-Yankee story that I was reading, but it had some sardonic material in there. And one of them was when the Yankees moved from the Polo Grounds, which is where they played their games, to the new Yankee Stadium in 1920. Well, it was christened the house that Ruth built.
Yeah.
Wrong-o, sports fans. It was the house built for Ruth.
Yes.
Because that's exactly the way it was. Hey, the right field is a chip shot. And he was bombing them in there. Now, he did hit, well, he and Mickey Mantle both hit shots that were up on the filigree on top of the roof, which were gargantuan shots. But, oh, no, that house was constructed to have that left-handed power bang him in the seats.
There was a time when the fence didn't come into play in a lot of baseball stadiums. Babe Ruth changed that. And also, as baseball stadiums changed through the years, they went to smaller ballparks to get more home runs. I remember a pitcher, it was probably Kurt Bavacqua, who pitched.
Dirty Kurt. How
pitched at the old Tiger Stadium, which the upper deck actually hung over the field. You could hit a home run, and it would not have left the park had it been for that upper deck. Right. And they asked him about giving up a number of home runs in that game. He goes, well, they were home runs just like they would have been in any other Little League baseball park.
Nice.
That was also the case at the Polo Grounds.
Yeah.
The upper deck there hung out over the outfield, and those big high pop-ups down the line, 251 feet away.
Yeah.
Would just hit the front row there and drop in.
Well, look at Fenway Park. I mean, that pesky pole is shorter than Yankee Stadium.
Yes, it is.
And then the Green Monster's not very far out either. You just have to loft it to get it
some
over.
Height on it.
Yeah.
There is an old story, guys. You would remember, I hope you would anyway, the name of one of the great sluggers in Major League Baseball, mostly the National League, back in the late 40s and early 50s, Ralph Kiner.
Oh, of course.
And Ralph, of course, later went on as a broadcaster for the New York Mets, very famous for his malaprops. But over and above that, he was a big-time home run hitter. He is all that the Pittsburgh Pirates had back then. Very similar to what they had now. Fans would wait around at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. They being 8-2 or 9-1 or whatever, such as they are these days. But the fans would wait around for Kiner's last at bat because they wanted to see him. What they did at Forbes Field was beautiful.
Yep.
It's a big ballpark. Left field, 351 feet away. They reconstructed it during his era there and brought it in by about 20 feet and called it Kiner's Kitchen. And that is where he blasted some of his home runs there. Then when he left, when he got traded to the Chicago Cubs, he got traded for an interesting story, too. He hit the Pirates up for a raise. They said, hey, we really can't afford it. He said, well, I'm going to hold out for more money. I think it was probably $10,000 or something like that. And Branch Rickey, who was running the Pirates back then, said, hey, Ralph, we lost with you. We'll lose without you.
Oh, my gosh.
And they sent him on to the Chicago Cubs. And they took away Kiner Kitchen.
Wow. Let's talk about the Chicago Cubs because they were the fire sale team this year. Yeah. They gave up Chris Bryant. They gave up Anthony Rizzo, Craig Kimbrell. They had in the past given away Starling Marte. They'd given away Starling Castro. They'd given away Gleyber Torres. This is the team that won the World Championship, 4 or 5 years ago?
2016,
2016, so it's been 5 years. And I remember the talk at the time. They were talking that this would be a legacy
dynasty
team. And here we are, and that team's gone now.
Don't discount it, though, because Rizzo is a free agent, Bryant was a free agent, and they're both gone, but they also both might come back.
Here's the thing that I think really flew under the radar. Javi Baez wasn't a must-trade candidate.
No.
He went to the Mets. I find that really interesting. I don't know a lot of people know the background on that. So obviously they have Francisco Lindor, who is, I know he's had a down year, but he's a phenomenal player, generational player at shortstop. Javi Baez isn't too far behind. Those two are best friends. So if you can sign Baez, move him to second base, that middle infield for the Mets is going to win a lot of games. So, yeah.
Big stories, of course, were the Dodgers making the moves that they made. They obviously got a lot better. Trey Turner's a young player, a great player. Also, Max Scherzer, one of the great pitchers in baseball right now. The Yankees making the moves that they made. I think the one that flew under the radar for me was Chris Bryant. Which is one of the big names out there to the Giants. The Giants holding their own right there and saying, okay, we're in this. And again, still consistently being one of the best teams of baseball right now. But can they hold the Dodgers off in this run? What do you think, Ned?
Well, they have a very nice team. I remember some, interestingly enough, though, it's how you put matchups on the field. Cardinals took 2 out of 3 in San Francisco from them and took 2 out of 3 in St. Louis from the Giants. I thought the Giants were beginning to falter. It's a matter of matchups and how you can bat against a pretty good pitching staff or whatever the case might have been. But whatever, I like the Giants ball club. They are not as good as the Dodgers. The Dodgers have the best team. They're world champs. They haven't been together. They've had injuries. They also have on their ball club, and this is non-baseball related, but they have a kid named Bauer who's a pretty good pitcher, but a not very good human being, apparently. Right. And I don't think that the media can be faulted for talking about the stories here because the reports that I have heard from people on whom I have a lot of give a lot of credibility is that nobody wants this guy. He's a great pitcher, but he is not a good human being and a very tough one, maybe almost close to a cancer in the locker room. Have you heard that, John?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Bauer is extremely talented. He's very outspoken. He tweets Rob Manfred directly about things. He has his own podcast where he talks about nuances of the game and taunts other players. He's entertaining at times, or at least he was, but the allegations facing him are extremely concerning. Right. And what I have been told, Ned, is the Dodgers, overwhelmingly, the players in the locker room do not want him back.
Get rid of him. Get him going. He's a teammate of Garrett Cole's at UCLA, and Garrett Cole's, Cole is with the Yankees now. Very less than complimentary remarks to make about him, and they were college teammates.
We'll come back in a minute. We'll do our Reynolds rankings. They're our own version of the Madden rankings, and we'll talk about who the best quarterback in the NFL is. I think you know who it is.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
I want to point out as we start here that we're at our second to last show on our regular Sunday slot, which is noon on Sundays, where we're at right now, for everybody that doesn't have a clock or a calendar in front of them. In a couple of weeks here, we start with our regular pregame shows that we'll be doing, and our first game will be on a Saturday, and that's against San Francisco, and I don't want to do the math here. I think we do a 5 o'clock show that day. So this is our second to last Sunday. And last week we joked about it because we love ESPN deep inside. We joked that they spent a whole week doing the Madden ratings, and I got to think about it. We should do the Reynolds ratings.
Yes.
And talk about the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Let's start right there. We're in preseason mode now. We'll do a full preseason episode next week, but let's talk about it. Who's the, in your opinion, the best quarterback in the NFL right now, Mr. Reynolds?
There are arguments in a number of cases because Aaron Rodgers is the reigning National Football League MVP, but here Patrick Mahomes has to come away with that honor because, after all, look what the guy's done. The Kansas City Chiefs are Patrick Mahomes. It's how he goes. And if they didn't have him at quarterback, certainly Andy Reid would look somewhere for someone who could run the very complicated offense that they have. But he doesn't have to because he has Mahomes there to run it, and Mahomes is that talent level who can pull something like that off. So I have to give my number one gold star to Mahomes as the top in the National Football League, but I do give Aaron Rodgers, I give him a very close 1A as far as that ranking is concerned. And then so forth and so on down there. There are any number of them. My goodness, Lamar Jackson, who in fact, do the Chiefs play them this year? I don't think they do.
They do play the
they
do play the Chiefs. When is that game? I've got my little schedule here in front. It's bigger now. I complained about that, and the next week Mike was nice enough to give us a big schedule. And they play them the second week of the season.
There we go.
That is September 19th. And that is a Sunday night game, too.
Is it in Baltimore?
It is at Baltimore.
Didn't they play them in Baltimore last year?
I think so.
And beat them there? Yeah. Lamar Jackson maybe had some injuries. Anyway, here's a guy who is just a phenomenal athlete, is able to do a lot of things, may not have quite the team in back of him. Keep in mind now, the Chiefs have constructed their team, especially their offense, to react to how Mahomes runs the ball club. Other teams attempt to do the same thing, but are they as effective? No, because they don't have the horses. That's why Kansas City has been so very effective in what they do. Anyway, Tom Brady, I would have to give number 2, because 1A is Rodgers. 2 is Brady, and even at 43, 44 years of age, he still gets it done. Look what he did, win a Super Bowl. Come on.
That's right.
So I would give those as my top 3.
One thing I'll say that I think is funny, they broadcast, of course, the Madden ratings now, which I think is the biggest fiasco. As someone who plays video games, here's where I listened to a little bit. I was like, okay, Mahomes is a 99 this year out of 100. Great. What lost me and made me stop paying attention was, and I kid you not, Josh Allen from the Bills. We remember how dominant of a season he had last year. His rating, which I believe was like an 81, didn't change from the year previous. Anyone who watched football last year knows Josh Allen had a superb season that he had never had. So if you're not going to bump him up after last year, I don't take a lot of stock in the Madden ratings.
What was Dak Prescott's?
I want to say he's down in the 70s.
Really?
To be honest,
well, that's funny because ESPN spent a lot of time talking about him and coming back this season for the Cowboys, and you would think that he had actually done something with his career, which he hasn't to this point.
Yeah, I mean, sorry,
Cowboy fans, but he hasn't.
He's serviceable, but I mean, if I'm taking the top 10 quarterbacks, he doesn't make my top 10.
I'll tell you another one who I should mention too is Kyler Murray.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, yeah.
I love the way Kyler Murray plays. I wish the Cardinals had a little bit more of a team behind him to back up what he can do. But Murray is very effective at what he does.
Well, you look at the quarterbacks that the Chiefs will face early in the season. I mean, first week, Cleveland Browns.
Baker Mayfield.
Mayfield's definitely in the top 10 for
Just
me.
a great quarterback, and a guy that's growing. You can see a Super Bowl possibly
yes.
there.
Yeah,
Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson,
amazing player.
amazing player, one of your favorites, I know, Josh.
Absolutely.
Then they play the Los Angeles Chargers. They've got a young quarterback there.
Justin Herbert.
Yeah. And Philadelphia Eagles. And we saw some...
Jalen Hurts showed
Jalen Hurts
streaks of greatness last
showed
year.
some streaks of greatness in his play. Then they play Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills. The Washington football team, they still haven't come up with the nickname yet, have they?
No.
They're apparently not going to.
Yeah, I think
they
they're just
they
gonna-
like the
they're gonna
Washington
roll with
football
it.
team.
Washington football team. Okay. I like that too. Sounds good. Who's their starting quarterback? I think they're still trying to figure that out.
They're
aren't
still
they?
figuring it
They're in
out.
training camp. Hey, give them a while here.
Tennessee Titans.
Tannehill, he's
Yeah, good
again, he's
quarterback.
done everything he can with not the most talent in the league.
And he is what's known as a serviceable quarterback.
Yes.
He gets the job done.
Game
and
manager.
Yes,
Hey, the guy can get it done.
Yeah.
And look at that's a good team, folks.
Yeah,
They're
a good,
gonna
very
be
good
awfully
team.
tough.
Well, he has to turn around and hand off a football. That's what he's got to do.
Yeah, he's got A.J. Brown's a really talented receiver too.
Yeah.
He's got some weapons.
New York Giants, and I think they're still trying to figure out their quarterback situation.
Daniel Jones, more
Yeah.
than likely. Yeah.
Yep.
The Duke kid, he's a good player.
Here's the team, and Ned mentioned this. Because he's 1A is Aaron Rodgers, but will he play for the Packers? Will he be with that team at
Right.
that point when they play in the season?
He will be.
I think he will
He's
be.
there now in training camp. They have not necessarily made up, but it's Rodgers who got the concessions in this argument. And the concession was he took a year off his contract.
Yep.
They lopped the year off. In other words, instead of a 3-year, now it's 2-year. In other words, it expires at the end of next season.
Correct.
So if he is not happy, he has
That's right.
sayonara, guys.
And then it's the Las Vegas Raiders coming up in
boy.
the season. Well, you don't know what you're going to get there.
Yeah, you just
the
don't.
Raiders.
It's a
The
mixed
Raiders
bag.
potentially could be a very good football team. They could potentially be a very good bad. They could be a very good bad. They could be a very bad football team.
Correct.
They're still a team that's on the cusp.
And here is one of the factors about the Raiders that I think is overlooked. It's an intrinsic one, but they played before no fans last year. None. Nobody was allowed in that magnificent new stadium they have in Las Vegas. The fans will be there this year. They will be there in full capacity. I think that has a difference in their team.
I think it does too.
Yep. Dallas Cowboys, we talked about Dak Prescott.
Prescott being back. Yep.
I don't look for the Cowboys to do much this year.
I don't think they'll be.
What do you think, Ned?
They're the Cowboys.
They're the boys.
And
They're the boys.
Jerry Jones will hog the spotlight as he always does, get on there and either be smiling and happy and every player's the greatest one who ever lived, or he's ready to execute them, one or the other. But from a talent standpoint, they might be contenders. They play the Chiefs, and they play them, we're at Arrowhead.
Yes, at Arrowhead.
When is- what's the date?
November 21st.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what kind of a team. They're kind of a puzzle. Right?
They are.
Yep. Denver Broncos, still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, Locke's serviceable. He's looked decent. So
He has been. He had a great career at Mizzou. He knows his players. I wouldn't put anything past him at all. Drew Lock can do some things.
Pittsburgh Steelers on December 16th, Ben Roethlisberger, who is pretty much at the end of his career, and you don't know whether he'll be playing or sitting the bench that time. He can still do some really great things, but he has very little mobility at this point in his career.
It is, Joe, a matter of his O-line.
Yeah,
He's got to have
exactly.
that in front of him.
exactly.
Well, that's what we've talked about with the show for 3 years now. We've said if you've got a good offensive line, these guys are all the best at what they do. And most organizations, I'm talking to you, the New York Jets and the New York Giants, any team in New York, that you feel like you draft a quarterback and that's all you have to do, that's going to be the magic is just going to come from that quarterback. You've got to protect that quarterback. You know, I know Manning got really dogged on late in his career. 2 Super Bowl championships. It is hard to throw a complete pass from your backside. And that's where he
exactly
spent
right.
most of the end of his career. If you don't have time to throw the ball, then forget it.
I'm going to give you a more glaring example than that, and that's Mr. Mahomes.
Oh my gosh,
Super Bowl,
yeah.
Limited O-line, and look what happened to him. Oh my, run over 400 yards backwards.
That's right.
Oh, my gracious, you can't have that.
Who else is on the schedule, Joe?
Well, we'll finish they play most of the rest of the AFC West as they finish the season. Interesting one, though, in my mind, is Joe Burrow.
Okay.
Cincinnati Bengals, because they play at the Bengals to kind of wrap up the season.
And that's what I was afraid of, and that's what I was going to bring up because I hadn't looked at the schedule. That's a trap game if I've ever heard one. Joe Burrows is the real deal, guys. And I watched him play before his injury. He is going to be a superb NFL quarterback. Now, whether they give him the weapons and the people around him that he needs, that remains to be seen. But he has the potential to be a very, very good quarterback.
It is the Bengals.
I know.
I drove behind. There's a Bengals fan here in Springfield. I drove behind a Bengals fan the other day. I saw the sticker on the back of the car, and I thought, man, you're wow, waving that flag.
Was it a car from the 80s? Maybe it was an Icky Woods Remainer or something.
Icky Woods. And the Icky Shuffle. Oh, that was so good. Gracious.
So at the top of the Reynolds ratings, it is Patrick Mahomes. Josh, you kind of run our Facebook page for us. Kind of string together the Reynolds ratings for us on the Facebook page.
I'll be glad to do that.
Out. We'll come back in just a minute and talk about what we're going to watch on TV this afternoon. I know it's your favorite thing to hear.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network.
I have to apologize to my partner here, John Oliver, who I've known for several years. I've been calling him Josh Roberts. Sorry, John.
It's okay.
You're not Josh. Josh is not with us today. His mom's a little under the weather, so we wish them well.
Definitely thinking of him.
Yes, in our hearts and our minds. So let's talk about what we're going to watch on sports today, or on the television, on the box. When you go home, are you going to watch the Olympics?
You know, I'm probably not. No, I have some writing work that I've got to complete for our upcoming football magazine.
For Forum?
I'm sorry?
For Forum?
In a way.
You didn't get that reference, did you?
No, I didn't.
Penthouse Forum?
You're over my head, man. Over my head.
John will explain it to you when we're off the air.
We'll talk off the air.
No, the answer is no. And I also do not get the Cardinals on my system at home, so I'll probably watch them on my cell phone here.
Yep.
So what are you going to do, John?
J&J. I'll probably watch the Cardinals. I'm going to actually try to watch some Olympics. I'm flying solo, so I only have my one son with me. The other son and my wife are in Tennessee with my daughter.
Really? Which one do you have?
I have Marshall.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so he's pretty low maintenance. If he comes out of his room, it'll be a shocker. So
no knock, but you don't have to worry about the house being burned down.
Oh no,
not with Marshall. No.
Well, unless
Holden, you might have to worry about the house.
To be fair, his room's pretty hot because all the electronics. So I mean, a fan catches, that PS5 is going to just.
He's got a PS5.
He does. Yeah.
Can I come over and play it?
Sure.
At your house? All right.
Sure.
I'm going to lay in his bed and play. He doesn't sleep above the door anymore, does he?
That was Holden.
Oh, that was Holden. I said Holden. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No. Holden. Yeah.
Well, I said you have to worry about the house burning down if Holden's there. So.
Oh yes. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah,
it's the fire starter.
That's right. It's like Drew Barrymore in the '80s. He is.
He can will it with his mind. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to watch?
I think some Olympics, honestly, because I'm kind of upset with myself. I haven't watched more. I've just read a lot of the results, and that's a byproduct of what we talked about earlier with the time zones. So, I'm really going to try to tune in and actually watch a little bit. I love the Summer Olympics, so I don't want to miss it and then regret it and not see them again for 4 years.
I think I'm going to call you the Jam from now on in, and I will call Josh Terry.
There we go.
Terry and the Jam.
Yeah, that works.
What do you think about that?
Anytime you can have association with something, hey, you've got it made.
Yeah.
Okay. I associate with a different, I'm better not get into it.
We're going to get ourselves in trouble here as we end the show. All right, next week we'll do our pregame as we get set for the NFL season. Have a great Sunday, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, sir, and to you.
And what about you, John?
You as well.
Have a great Sunday, okay?
Yes, you as well,
We'll see
Joe.
you guys next week. Download us as a podcast. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. Thanks to Corbin Campbell, Scott Meyer, and Mike the Intern. We'll see you next Sunday.